The rain fell hard on the city of Geneva. It was a cold morning in March, and Captain Daniel Harper stood at the window of his small hotel room. He watched the drops hit the glass and slide down slowly. He did not know that this day would change his life forever. Daniel was 34 years old. He had brown hair that was starting to show a little gray at the sides. His eyes were green, and they had seen many things in his years of service. He had joined the United Earth Coalition Navy when he was 19. For 15 years, he had served on ships that traveled between the stars. He had fought pirates. He had saved lives. He had lost friends. The military was his home, and he was good at what he did. 3 weeks ago, everything had changed. Daniel had been commanding a patrol near the border of human space. His ship, the Starlight, had encountered a group of alien vessels. The aliens were Valdari, members of a powerful empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds over thousands of years. The Valdari ships had crossed into human territory and opened fire without warning. Daniel had done what any captain would do. He had defended his crew. In the battle that followed, 17 Valdari warriors died. The Starlight suffered damage, but all of Daniel's people survived. He had thought he would receive praise for protecting his crew. Instead, he had been called back to Earth and told to wait. Now he understood why. A knock came at his door. Daniel turned from the window and walked across the room. He opened the door and found Admiral Patricia Lawson standing in the hallway. She was a tall woman with gray hair cut short and a face that rarely smiled. Daniel had served under her command for 3 years. He respected her more than anyone else in the fleet. "It is time," she said. Her voice was quiet and serious. Daniel nodded. He picked up his uniform jacket from the bed and put it on. He checked himself in the mirror one last time. He looked tired. He had not slept well in days. Something bad was coming. He could feel it. They walked together through the hotel and out to a waiting car. The vehicle drove them through the wet streets of Geneva toward the World Court building. Daniel had never been inside it before. He had seen pictures, of course. Everyone knew what it looked like. It was where the leaders of Earth made their biggest decisions. Admiral Lawson did not speak during the drive. She stared out the window at the passing buildings. Daniel wanted to ask her what was happening, but something told him to stay quiet. He would learn the truth. Soon enough, the car stopped in front of the World Court. Soldiers in formal uniforms stood at the entrance. They saluted as Daniel and the Admiral walked past. Inside, the building was grand and old. The floors were made of marble. The walls were covered with paintings of important moments in human history. Daniel felt very small as he walked through those halls. They entered a large room filled with people. Daniel recognized some of them. There were judges in their robes. There were politicians from different countries. There were military officers with medals on their chests. Everyone turned to look at Daniel as he entered. Their faces were grim. At the front of the room, a large screen showed an image that made Daniel's heart go cold. It was a fleet of ships. Thousands of ships. They hung in the darkness of space like a swarm of angry insects. Each one was marked with the symbol of the Valdari Dominion. "Captain Harper," said a voice. Daniel looked toward the speaker. It was Judge William Perry, the head of the World Court. He was an old man with white hair and kind eyes that now looked very sad. "Please come forward." Daniel walked to the front of the room. He stood before the judges and the politicians and the officers. He stood before the image of the fleet that could destroy everything he had ever known. Judge Perry spoke slowly and clearly. He explained that the Valdari High Sovereign, a being named Kethvorin, had sent a message to Earth. The Valdari were angry about the death of their warriors. They demanded payment for the blood that had been spilled. If they did not receive what they wanted, they would attack. "Our fleet is strong," the judge said. but it is not strong enough. If the Valdari attack, we will lose. Billions of people will die. Our civilization will end. Daniel listened with a heavy heart. He had known the situation was bad. He had not known it was this bad. The High Sovereign has made a demand, Judge Perry continued. He does not want our worlds. He does not want our resources. He wants something else. He wants a human husband for his 2 granddaughters. The room was silent. Daniel did not understand at first. Why would the ruler of a mighty empire want a human to marry his granddaughters? It made no sense. Then Judge Perry looked directly at Daniel, and suddenly everything became clear. You commanded the ship that killed the Valdari patrol, the judge said. The High Sovereign has specifically requested you. You will travel to the Valdari homeworld. You will marry his granddaughters. You will live among them as a member of their royal family. This is the price of peace. Daniel felt like the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. He wanted to speak, but no words came out. He looked around the room at all the faces watching him. Some looked guilty. Some looked relieved. None of them would meet his eyes for long. Admiral Lawson stepped forward. She put her hand on Daniel's shoulder. I am sorry, she said softly. We tried to find another way. There is no other way. Daniel thought about his life. He thought about his family back in Ohio. His mother was still alive. She would be 70 next month. He had planned to visit her. Now he would never see her again. He thought about his friends, his ship, his crew. All of it was being taken from him. He could refuse. He could say no and walk out of this room. But then what? Then the Valdari would come. Then the war would start. Then everyone would die. Daniel Harper was a soldier. He had spent his whole life protecting people. He had always known that one day he might be asked to give everything for his duty. He had just never imagined it would be like this. He looked up at the image of the Valdari fleet. All those ships. All that power. And the only thing standing between them and Earth was him. When do I leave? He asked. The room let out a breath it had been holding. Judge Perry nodded slowly. There was respect in his old eyes. Tomorrow morning, he said. The diplomatic ship is being prepared. You will have the night to say your goodbyes. Daniel nodded. He did not trust himself to speak again. He turned and walked out of the room. Admiral Lawson followed him. The politicians and the officers watched him go. They would tell stories about this day. They would call him a hero or a sacrifice or a fool. Daniel did not care what they called him. He stepped out into the rain and let the water fall on his face. Tomorrow he would leave his world behind. Tomorrow he would travel to an empire that had crushed civilizations. Tomorrow he would marry 2 alien princesses he had never met. But tonight, he would call his mother and tell her he loved her. Tonight, he would be Daniel Harper for the last time. Because tomorrow, everything would change. The morning came too quickly. Daniel had spent the night in a small room in a far corner of the palace. It was comfortable enough, with a bed that was too large for him and windows that looked out over the city. But he did not sleep well. How could anyone sleep, knowing what waited for them? Vethrin came for him at dawn. The old Valdari led him through winding corridors to a room where servants waited. They dressed Daniel in simple clothes made of rough fabric. No armor, no weapons. He would face the trials as he was. The first trial is combat, Vethrin explained. You will fight in the arena of ancestors. Thousands will watch. You will face a champion chosen by the court. Daniel nodded. He had expected this. The Valdari valued strength above all else. Of course, they would want to see if he could fight. What are the rules? He asked. Vethrin's mouth twisted into something that might have been amusement. You fight until one of you cannot continue. There are no other rules. They walked to the arena. It was an ancient structure, built from stone that had stood for centuries. Seats rose in circles around a central pit of sand. Valdari citizens filled every seat. Their voices created a roar that Daniel could feel in his chest. He stepped into the arena. The sand was hot beneath his feet. The orange sun beat down from above. Daniel looked around at the crowd. They were cheering, but not for him. They were waiting to see him fall in the roll box. High above the arena floor, he could see Kethvorin sitting on a smaller throne. Salith and Karenna sat beside him. Salith leaned forward with interest. Karenna watched with her usual calm expression. A gate opened on the far side of the arena. Daniel's opponent walked out. The champion was massive. Even for a Valdari, he was huge. He stood nearly 8 feet tall. His forearms were thick with muscle. Scars covered his body from hundreds of battles. He carried no weapon. He did not need one. His fists were weapons enough. The champion's name was Gorth. The crowd chanted it as he walked to the center of the arena. Gorth looked at Daniel and laughed. It was a deep, cruel sound. This is what humanity sends. Gorth said, "This small thing? I will break him in two." A horn sounded. The trial had begun. Gorth charged forward. He was fast for his size. Daniel barely had time to move before one of those massive fists came sweeping toward his head. He ducked and rolled away, coming up on his feet several meters from where he had started. The crowd laughed. They thought he was running. Let them think that. Gorth turned and came at him again. This time, Daniel did not dodge. He waited until the last moment, then stepped inside the reach of those long arms. He drove his fist into Gorth's side, hitting a spot where the muscles were thinner. The champion grunted in surprise. He swung 2 arms down at Daniel, who barely escaped being crushed. Daniel rolled again and came up breathing hard. His hand ached from the punch. Hitting a Valdari was like hitting stone. They circled each other. Gorth was angry now. No one had ever hurt him in an arena before. This small human had managed it in the first minute of their fight. "Lucky," Gorth growled. "You will not be lucky again." He attacked with all 4 arms this time. Daniel blocked what he could and dodged what he could not. A fist caught him in the shoulder and sent him spinning. He hit the sand hard and tasted blood in his mouth. The crowd roared. They wanted him to stay down. They wanted this to be over. Daniel got up. Gorth hit him again. And again. Each time, Daniel went down. Each time, he got back up. His body screamed in pain. His vision blurred. Blood dripped from cuts on his face. But he would not stay down. He could not. 7 minutes into the fight, Daniel was barely standing. Gorth circled him slowly, enjoying the moment. The champion was not tired at all. He was playing with his food, but Daniel had been watching. He had been learning. The Valdari fought with power and aggression. They did not expect their opponents to study them. They did not expect patience. Gorth lunged forward for what should have been the final blow. Daniel saw it coming. He had seen the same attack 3 times before. He knew exactly how Gorth would move. Instead of dodging back, Daniel stepped forward. He was inside Gorth's reach before the champion could react. Daniel drove his elbow up into Gorth's throat with all the strength he had left. The champion staggered. For the first time, shock appeared on his face. He could not breathe. His hands went to his throat. Daniel did not stop. He kicked the side of Gorth's knee. The joint bent the wrong way. The massive Valdari fell to one knee with a roar of pain. Daniel hit him again. And again. He put everything he had into each blow. Gorth swung at him wildly, but Daniel was too close, too fast. 10 minutes into the fight, Daniel was still standing. 11 minutes, and Gorth was bleeding from a cut above his eye. Then a fist caught Daniel in the chest. He felt something crack. The world went white with pain. He flew backward and hit the sand. This time, he could not get up. His body would not obey him. Gorth limped toward him. The champion was hurt, but he was still standing. He raised all 4 arms for the killing blow. Enough. The voice came from the royal box. Kethvorn had stood up. He raised one hand. "The trial is complete," the High Sovereign announced. "The human has proven himself." The arena went silent. No one had expected this. The champion lowered his arms slowly. He looked at Daniel lying in the sand, then up at his ruler. "He did not win," Gorth said. "He did not need to win," Kethvor replied. "He needed to prove he was worthy. Look at him. Look at what he did to you. No human has ever lasted more than 2 minutes against a Voldari champion. This one fought for 11. He drew your blood. He nearly broke your knee. And even now, look at his eyes. He's still ready to fight." Daniel lay in the sand, staring up at the orange sky. He heard the words, but could not respond. Everything hurt. But it was true. If Gorth came for him, he would fight. He would keep fighting until his heart stopped. Seleth was standing at the edge of the royal box. Daniel could see her looking down at him. Something had changed in her expression. The contempt was gone. In its place was something else. Something that might have been respect. Servants carried Daniel from the arena. They took him to a medical room where Voldari healers treated his wounds. The technology was advanced. Within a day, his broken ribs were mending. Within 2 days, he could walk again. Karenna visited him on the second night. She came alone, without guards or servants. She stood at the door of his room and studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You should have died," she said. Daniel was sitting on his bed. He looked up at the alien princess who might become his wife. "I have been told that many times. Why did you not surrender? You knew you could not win." Daniel thought about the question. It was a good one. He was not sure he knew the answer himself. "Because my people were watching," he finally said. "Because Earth was watching. I could not surrender. I could not let them see humanity give up." Karenna tilted her head. The silver patterns on her skin seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. "You fought for honor," she said. "I did not think humans understood honor." "We understand it differently than you do," Daniel replied. "But yes, we understand it." Karenna walked into the room. She moved gracefully, like water flowing over stones. She sat in a chair across from Daniel's bed and folded 2 of her hands in her lap. The other 2 rested on the arms of the chair. "The second trial is tomorrow," she said. "It is a test of the mind. You will be given a puzzle that has defeated our greatest scholars for generations. You will have 7 days to solve it. If you fail, you will be deemed unworthy." "And if I am deemed unworthy?" Karenna's expression did not change. "Then you will die, and your world will burn." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then I will not fail." Karenna studied him for a long moment. Then she did something Daniel did not expect. She smiled. "Perhaps you will not," she said. "You are strange, Daniel Harper. Different from what I expected. I find myself curious about you." She stood and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back. "Solve the puzzle, human. I wish to see what happens next." Then she was gone, and Daniel was alone with his thoughts and his healing wounds. Tomorrow would bring a new challenge. He did not know if he could pass it, but he knew he would try. For Earth, for humanity, for the 2 alien women who were watching to see if he was worthy. He closed his eyes and slept. He dreamed of puzzles and princesses and the endless stars between worlds. The diplomatic ship was called the Horizon. It was not a warship. It was built for peace, painted white with gold stripes along its sides. Daniel Harper stood at the observation window and watched as Earth grew smaller behind him. The blue and green planet that had been his home faded into the darkness of space until it was just another dot among the stars. The journey to the Bayan planet that had been his home faded into the darkness of space until it was just another dot among the stars. The journey to the Bayan planet that had been not of miles of space until it was into the darkness of stars until it was just another dot among the stars. The journey to the Benden Valdari homeworld would take 3 weeks. Daniel had that much time to prepare himself for what was coming. He did not know if it would be enough that the ship's captain was a woman named Lisa Monroe. She was kind to Daniel, but she kept her distance. Everyone on the ship treated him the same way. They looked at him like he was already dead. Perhaps they were right that Daniel spent most of his time alone in his cabin. The room was small but comfortable. It had a bed, a desk, and a screen where he could access information. He used that screen to learn everything he could about the Valdari. What he learned did not comfort him. The Valdari were an ancient race. They had traveled between stars when humans were still living in caves. Their empire stretched across 1,000 worlds. They had conquered dozens of other species. Some of those species no longer existed. The Valdari had wiped them out completely. The Valdari themselves were not like humans. They were tall, much taller than any person Daniel had ever met. Most of them stood close to 7 feet. Their skin was blue-gray, like stone in shadow. They had 4 arms instead of 2. Their faces were angular, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. They were warriors. Every Valdari learned to fight from childhood. Combat was sacred to them. Honor was earned through battle. The weak did not survive in their society. The strong ruled, and they had been strong for a very long time. Daniel read about the High Sovereign Cathvoran. The old alien had ruled the Dominion for over 300 years. He had led armies. He had crushed rebellions. He had watched empires rise and fall while his people grew ever more powerful. He was feared and respected across the galaxy. Then Daniel read about his future wives. The first was named Silith. She was the elder of the 2 granddaughters. She was 112 years old, which was young for a Valdari. She was a warrior of great renown. She had commanded fleets in battle. She had killed enemies with her own hands. The reports described her as fierce, proud, and unforgiving. She had never shown interest in taking a mate. Many had tried to win her favor. All had failed. The second was named Karenna. She was 87 years old, younger than her sister. She was not a warrior like Salith. She was a scholar. She studied science and mathematics. She had discovered new ways to travel between stars. The reports said she was brilliant but cold. She spoke little and watched much. Like her sister, she had never chosen a mate. Daniel looked at the images of the 2 women on his screen. Salith stared back at him with eyes full of challenge. Karenna's gaze was calm and calculating. Neither of them looked happy about this arrangement. He wondered what they thought of him. Did they see him as a punishment? Did they hate him for what his crew had done? Or did they not think of him at all? The days passed slowly. Daniel exercised in the ship's small gym. He ate meals alone in his cabin. He practiced speaking basic Valdari phrases. The language was difficult. It had sounds that human throats were not designed to make. But he kept trying. He would not arrive helpless. On the 15th day of the journey, Captain Monroe invited him to the bridge. She wanted to show him something. Daniel walked through the ship's corridors. Crew members nodded at him as he passed. He climbed up to the bridge and found Captain Monroe standing at the main window. She pointed into the darkness ahead. "Look," she said. Daniel looked. At first, he saw nothing but stars. Then he noticed that some of the stars were moving. They were not stars at all. They were ships, Veldari ships. There were hundreds of them. They floated in formation around a massive structure that Daniel could barely comprehend. It was a space station, but it was the size of a small moon. Lights covered its surface like glowing veins. Ships flew in and out of huge openings in its sides. "That is the gate of Kethra," Captain Monroe said. "It is the entrance to Veldari space. Every ship that enters must pass through there. They will scan us. They will search us. If they find anything they do not like, we will never leave." Daniel stared at the station. He had known the Veldari were powerful. Seeing that power with his own eyes was something else entirely. Humanity had nothing like this. Nothing even close. The horizon approached slowly. Veldari ships moved to surround them. Daniel could see the weapons on those ships. Any one of them could destroy the horizon in seconds, but no one fired. The diplomatic ship was expected. After several tense minutes, they were allowed to pass through the gate. Daniel watched the massive station slide past his window. He saw Veldari soldiers standing on platforms, watching the human ship go by. Some of them bared their teeth. 6 more days of travel followed. The Veldari homeworld grew larger in the window each day. It was a beautiful planet, Daniel had to admit. It had deep blue oceans and vast mountain ranges. 3 moons hung in its sky. Cities covered its surface. Connected by bridges that stretched for miles, the horizon landed on a platform in the capital city. Daniel stood at the door as it opened. Hot air rushed in. The sky above was orange and pink. 2 of the planet's 3 moons were visible even in daylight. A delegation waited for him. Dozens of Veldari soldiers stood in perfect rows. They wore armor that gleamed in the light. Their eyes followed Daniel as he walked down the ramp. He felt very small and very alone. An older Veldari stepped forward. He wore robes instead of armor. His face was lined with age, and his eyes were sharp. "I am Vethran," he said in English that was slow but clear. "I will take you to the palace. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not touch anything. Follow me." Daniel followed. The soldiers fell into formation around him. They marched through streets filled with Veldari citizens who stopped to stare at the small human being escorted through their city. Some of them laughed. Others spat on the ground. Daniel kept his eyes forward and his back straight. The palace was enormous. It rose above the city like a mountain made of black stone. Towers reached toward the sky. Banners hung from every wall. Guards stood at every door. Inside, the palace was even more impressive. The halls were vast and filled with statues of ancient warriors. The floor was polished so smooth that Daniel could see his reflection. Everything spoke of power and history and pride. Vethran led him to a great hall. It was the biggest room Daniel had ever seen. Thousands of Veldari filled the space. They stood in groups, talking quietly, all of them watching the human. As he entered, at the far end of the hall sat the High Sovereign. Kethvorin was ancient. His skin was darker than the others, almost black. His eyes burned with a light that seemed to come from within. He sat on a throne carved from bone and metal. 2 figures stood beside him, Salith and Karenna. The elder sister wore armor covered with symbols that Daniel did not understand. She was tall and powerful. Her forearms were crossed over her chest. She looked at Daniel like he was an insect that had crawled into her home. The younger sister wore flowing robes covered with mathematical patterns. She was smaller than Salith, with silver markings on her skin. Her gaze was curious but distant. She studied Daniel like he was a puzzle to be solved. Daniel walked forward. The crowd parted before him. His footsteps echoed in the vast hall. When he reached the throne, he stopped and stood at attention. He did not bow. He did not kneel. He met the High Sovereign's eyes and waited. Kethvorin smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator studying its prey. "So, the old alien said in a voice like grinding stones. "This is the human who killed my warriors." Daniel nodded. "Yes, I am Captain Daniel Harper." The hall went silent. Every Valdari watched and listened. "You stand before me without fear," Kethvorin observed. "Either you are very brave or very foolish." "I am a soldier," Daniel said. "I did my duty. I will not apologize for protecting my crew." Something changed in the High Sovereign's expression. He leaned forward on his throne and studied Daniel more closely. "Interesting," he said. "Perhaps there is more to humanity than I thought." He gestured to his granddaughters. "These are Salith and Karenna. They will be your wives. But first, you must prove you are worthy of them. You will face the trials of worth. If you pass, you will marry into my family. If you fail, you will die." Daniel looked at the two alien women who would decide his fate. Salith still looked at him with contempt, but Karenna tilted her head slightly, and for just a moment, Daniel thought he saw something like interest in her eyes. "I accept," he said. The word echoed through the hall. There was no going back now. Daniel Harper had stepped into a world he did not understand, and the only way out was through. The chamber of the second trial was deep beneath the palace. Daniel was led down spiraling stairs carved into black stone. The air grew cooler as they descended. Lights embedded in the walls cast strange shadows that danced as he walked. The puzzle chamber was round and vast. In its center stood a structure that Daniel could not understand at first glance. It was made of metal and crystal and things he could not name. Parts of it moved slowly, rotating and shifting in patterns that seemed random but clearly were not. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Vethran stood at the entrance. "This is the riddle of Kethra," he explained. "It was created by the first High Sovereign over 10,000 years ago. Many have tried to solve it. All have failed. You have 7 days. What happens when it is solved?" Daniel asked. "No one knows. It has never been solved." Daniel walked toward the structure. It was larger than he had thought, standing twice his height. Symbols covered its surface. Some of them glowed. Others were dark. The moving parts clicked and hummed as they rotated through their endless patterns. "You may have food and water brought to you," Vethran continued. "You may rest when you need to. But you may not leave this chamber until the 7 days have passed or you have solved the riddle. Do you understand?" Daniel nodded. He did not look away from the puzzle. Something about it called to him. It was complex beyond anything he had ever seen, but there was order within the chaos. There had to be. No one built something like this without purpose. The door closed behind him. He was alone with the riddle that had defeated the greatest minds of an ancient empire. Daniel did not touch anything at first. He walked around the structure slowly, looking at it from every angle. He watched the moving parts and tried to see their patterns. He studied the symbols and tried to understand their meaning. Hours passed. He did not notice. Servants brought food. Daniel ate without tasting it. His mind was elsewhere, lost in the complexity of the puzzle. He began to see things. Patterns within patterns. Connections that were not obvious at first glance. The Valdari thought in terms of conquest. They approached problems with force and determination. They tried to make the puzzle submit to their will. But the puzzle had been built by a Valdari, and it was designed to resist that approach. Every forceful solution led to a dead end. On the second day, Daniel began to experiment. He pressed symbols gently and watched what happened. He turned small parts and observed the changes. He was not trying to solve the puzzle yet. He was trying to understand it. He was trying to learn its language. On the third day, he realized something important. The puzzle was not a test of intelligence. It was a test of perspective. The Valdari had been trying to solve it as Valdari. They brought their assumptions and their culture and their way of thinking. Those things were walls that blocked them from seeing the truth. Daniel was not Valdari. He was human. And humans thought differently. Humans were not conquerors. They were survivors. Throughout their history, they had faced problems they could not overcome directly. So they had learned to go around, to find another way, to see things from angles that others missed. Daniel looked at the puzzle again. This time, he tried to forget everything he knew about Valdari logic. He imagined he was a child seeing this structure for the first time. What would a child see? The symbols were not instructions. They were distractions. The moving parts were not the mechanism. They were the noise that hid the signal. On the fourth day, Daniel stopped looking at the puzzle and started looking at the chamber itself. The walls were not smooth. There were imperfections in the stone. Tiny marks that might have been decorations or might have been something more. He spent hours mapping those marks. When he was done, he saw that they formed a pattern that matched nothing on the puzzle itself. But when he stood in a certain spot and looked at the puzzle through the lens of that pattern, everything changed. The puzzle had a back. Not a physical back, but a conceptual one. A way of looking at it that reversed everything. The symbols that seemed important were not. The parts that seemed to matter were decoration. The real mechanism was hidden in the spaces between things. On the fifth day, Daniel began to solve the puzzle. He did not force anything. He did not fight the structure. He moved with it, adjusting tiny elements that the Valdari scholars had ignored because they seemed too small to matter. Each adjustment changed the pattern slightly. Each change brought him closer to understanding that the servants who brought his food watched him work. Word spread through the palace. The human was doing something no one had ever done before. He was making progress. On the sixth day, Salith came to the chamber. She stood at the entrance and watched Daniel work. He was aware of her presence, but did not stop. He was too close now. The puzzle was opening before him like a flower turning toward the sun. How? Salith asked. Her voice was rough with confusion. How are you doing this? Daniel paused. He looked at the warrior princess who had never lost a battle, who had never faced a problem she could not defeat with strength. I am not doing what you would do, he said simply. I am doing what only I can do. Salith did not respond. She watched him for a long time. Then she left without another word. On the seventh day, Daniel solved the puzzle. It happened in the morning, just as the first light came through small openings in the ceiling. Daniel pressed one final symbol, turned one final part, and everything changed. The structure stopped moving. The symbols all began to glow with soft golden light. A sound filled the chamber, deep and resonant like a bell that had been waiting 10,000 years to ring. And then the puzzle opened. Inside was something that Daniel did not expect. It was not treasure or weapons or ancient knowledge. It was a message. Holographic letters appeared in the air above the structure, written in old Valdari script. Daniel could not read it, but he understood its meaning when translators later told him the words. The first High Sovereign had created this puzzle as a test. Not a test of intelligence or strength, but a test of openness. Only someone who could see beyond their own assumptions could solve it. Only someone who thought differently could succeed. The message said that the Valdari had grown too certain of themselves. They had conquered so many worlds that they had forgotten how to learn. The puzzle was meant to remind them that there was always another perspective. Always another way. For 10,000 years, no Valdari had been able to see past their own nature. They needed an outsider. They needed someone like Daniel. The news spread quickly. By midday, the entire capital knew that the human had solved the riddle of Kethra. By evening, the story had reached distant worlds. Daniel Harper, a simple captain from a young species, had done what the greatest Valdari minds could not. Kethvorn summoned him to the throne room. The High Sovereign did not speak for a long time. He simply looked at Daniel with those ancient, burning eyes. "You have surprised me, human," HFY finally said. "That does not happen often." "I only did what I could," Daniel replied. "I am not smarter than your scholars. I simply think differently, yes." HFY leaned back on his throne. "That is exactly why you succeeded. And that is exactly why you may be worthy after all." The third trial remained. Daniel was taken to a ship and dropped on a frozen moon far from the capital. He was given a knife and his clothes. Nothing else. He was expected to survive for 3 days. If he could do that, he would have proven himself completely. Daniel stepped off the ship onto ice and snow. The cold cut through him immediately. The sky above was dark and filled with unfamiliar stars. He was alone on a world that wanted to kill him, but he was Daniel Harper. He was human. And if there was one thing humans knew how to do, it was survive. He walked toward a distant ridge, looking for shelter from the wind. The 7th day of the third trial was about to begin. By the time it ended, Daniel would have either earned his place among the Valdari or died trying. Either way, he would not give up. He would never give up. That was what it meant to be human. The frozen moon was trying to kill Daniel Harper. The wind screamed across the ice like a living thing. The temperature was so far below freezing that his breath turned to crystals before it left his lips. Every step was agony. Every moment was a fight for survival. He had been on this moon for 5 days now. The trial had only required 3. But Daniel had not activated his emergency beacon. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him quit. On the first day, he had found a cave in the side of a frozen cliff. It was not much, barely large enough for him to fit inside, but it blocked the wind. He had gathered what fuel he could find, dried vegetation that grew in cracks between the ice. He had made fire using friction, the way his grandfather had taught him when he was a boy. That fire saved his life. On the second day, he had found food. Strange creatures lived beneath the ice, fish-like things that swam through underground rivers. Daniel had cut through the ice with his knife and waited. When a creature came close, he struck. The meat was tough and tasted like nothing he had ever eaten, but it filled his stomach and gave him strength. On the third day, the trial was officially over. A ship flew overhead, ready to pick him up. Daniel ignored it. He had seen something in the distance, a larger cave system that might offer better shelter. He wanted to explore it. He wanted to prove that he could do more than just survive. The ship circled several times. Then it flew away. Daniel imagined the confusion on the faces of those who watched. The human had passed the trial. Why was he still out here? On the 4th day, Daniel reached the larger caves. They were magnificent. Ice formations hung from the ceiling like chandeliers made by gods. Strange lights glowed in the walls, bioluminescent organisms that had evolved in this frozen darkness. Daniel explored for hours, mapping the passages, learning the hidden geography of this alien place. On the 5th day, he built a real shelter. He used ice blocks cut with his knife. He lined the floor with insulating material from the vegetation he had gathered. He created a space that was almost comfortable, where he could rest without fear of freezing to death. On the 6th day, he hunted. The creatures beneath the ice were not the only life on this moon. There were larger things, predators that roamed the surface, looking for prey. Daniel had seen their tracks. Now he set out to find them. He found one in a valley between 2 frozen hills. It was big, the size of a bear, but built lower to the ground. It had white fur and black eyes and teeth that could tear through bone. When it saw Daniel, it charged. Daniel did not run. He waited. The creature was fast, but it was not smart. It attacked in a straight line, expecting its prey to flee. Daniel stepped aside at the last moment and drove his knife into the creature's side. It roared in pain and spun to face him. Blood stained the white snow. They fought for 10 minutes. Daniel was cut twice. The creature was stabbed 5 times. In the end, Daniel stood over the body of his enemy, breathing hard, blood dripping from his wounds. He had won. He skinned the creature and used its fur to make warm clothing. He cooked its meat over a fire in his shelter. He ate well that night. On the 7th day, the Valdari came for him. Not a retrieval ship this time. A full delegation. Soldiers in armor. Officers in formal dress. And with them, Salith and Karenna. They found Daniel sitting outside his shelter, cooking meat over a fire. He looked up as they approached. His face was weathered by the cold. His hands were rough from work, but his eyes were bright and alive. Salith stopped a few meters away. She stared at the shelter Daniel had built. She stared at the fur he wore. She stared at the evidence of everything he had done in the past week. "You were supposed to survive for 3 days," she said. No, you have been here for 7. I wanted to see what I could do." Karenna walked forward and knelt beside the fire. She picked up a piece of cooked meat and examined it. "This is from a Vethkal," she said. "They are apex predators on this moon. Our soldiers hunt them in teams of 4. It attacked me," Daniel said. "I defended myself." Karenna looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine, not the calculating expression he had seen before. "You are a remarkable creature, Daniel Harper." They took him back to the capital. The wedding would happen in 3 days. Daniel had passed all the trials. He had proven himself worthy. The ceremony took place beneath the 3 suns of the Valdari homeworld. Every noble house sent representatives. Ambassadors from distant species came to witness the event. The human who had killed Valdari warriors was now becoming part of the royal family. The galaxy watched in amazement. Daniel wore clothes that the Valdari had made for him. They were strange and beautiful, woven with patterns that told the story of his trials. Salith wore armor polished until it shone like mirrors. Karenna wore robes covered with equations and star maps. They were the most beautiful beings Daniel had ever seen. The vows were spoken in both languages. Daniel promised to honor his wives and stand beside them through all challenges. Salith and Karenna promised the same. When the ceremony was complete, something changed. Daniel felt a connection to the 2 women that he could not explain. They were part of him now, and he was part of them. The feast lasted for hours. Daniel sat between his wives at the high table. Nobles approached to offer congratulations or to study the human who had achieved the impossible. Some were friendly. Some were not. Daniel handled them all with calm confidence. Late in the evening, Cathvorin approached him. The High Sovereign gestured for Daniel to follow him to a quiet corner of the Great Hall. "Do you know why I demanded this marriage?" Cathvorin asked. Daniel shook his head. "I have wondered. It seemed strange." "The border incident was not an accident," the old alien said. "I sent those ships into your space deliberately. I wanted to see how humanity would respond." Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. "You tested us." "Yes, other species have surrendered when faced with Valdari aggression. Others have fled. Your people fought. Your people killed my warriors and did not apologize. Do you understand what that means? Tell me." Cathvorin's eyes gleamed in the light of the celebration. "It means you are strong. Not in the way we measure strength, perhaps, but strong in ways that matter. You do not give up. You do not surrender. You find ways to survive that others cannot imagine." He placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. The grip was firm, but not threatening. "This marriage is not a punishment, Daniel Harper. It is an invitation. I want humanity as an ally, not an enemy. I want your persistence and your creativity and your refusal to accept defeat. The Dominion has grown old and set in its ways. We need new perspectives. We need you." Daniel looked back at the celebration. He saw Salith talking with military officers, her posture proud and strong. He saw Karenna engaged in discussion with scholars, her mind clearly racing with ideas. These were his wives now. This was his family. "What happens to my people?" he asked. "They will be offered alliance, trade agreements, access to technology they have not yet dreamed of, and protection. Any enemy of humanity will be an enemy of the Voldari Dominion." It was more than Daniel had hoped for, more than anyone had imagined possible. He had come here expecting to sacrifice his life for peace. Instead, he had won something far greater. The months that followed were not easy. Daniel had to learn how to live in a culture vastly different from his own. He trained with Salith, who pushed him harder than any instructor he had ever had. He studied with Karenna, who introduced him to sciences that expanded his understanding of the universe. The relationship grew slowly. Salith came to respect Daniel's determination, the way he never gave up no matter how difficult the challenge. Karenna came to appreciate his different way of thinking, how he saw solutions she had never considered, and Daniel came to love them. Not the passionate love of songs and stories, but something deeper. A partnership. A bond. Two alien women who had become part of his soul. One evening, 6 months after the wedding, the three of them stood on a balcony overlooking the capital. Ships from Earth and the Dominion crossed the sky above, traveling to destinations that would have been impossible a year ago. Humanity and the Voldari were building something together. Something new. Salith put one of her hands on Daniel's shoulder. Karenna took his hand in hers. Neither spoke. They did not need to. Daniel Harper had been sent to the Voldari as a sacrifice. He had become a bridge between two civilizations. He had shown that strength could take many forms, and that the smallest beings could change the course of history. Humanity would thrive now. They would grow and learn and reach for stars they had never imagined. And at the heart of it all was a simple captain from Ohio who had refused to give up, who had faced impossible trials and found a way through. That was what humans did. That was who they were, and the galaxy would never be the same.